Hi everyone, my name is Adam Goodrich, and this video for Isolation Ed is focusing on retrieval practice and how we can use this in the classroom. We'll look at what retrieval practice is, as well as some practical strategies that I've used, which I believe have been successful in my own classroom. I remember in my NQT year, I remember teaching students sort of lesson by lesson, getting through the scheme of work, and maybe after the end of 6, 7, 8 weeks, we would do a test, an assessment. I'd be really confident they'd do really well. I was thinking, right, I've taught all the content that they need, and they got it in the lessons, etc. So, I'm pretty confident. Then the test would come around, and I often remember the kids just didn't really remember it. I remember thinking, was this my fault? Was I doing something wrong? Am I a bad teacher? And this cycle sort of really continued. And I remember thinking then, so why weren't students remembering the content that I taught them? How come they weren't doing well in the assessments? Well, students just weren't given the chance to recall the prior learning until the actual test. So how can they actually remember something they did 2 months ago in a standalone lesson, a 1-hour lesson? Kids don't learn in 1-hour lessons. They learn over a period of time. And I think one of our roles as teachers is to ensure that we plan into lessons the chance to and the opportunity to recall prior learning. So, what is retrieval practice then? So as teachers, we spend a lot of our time trying to get information into students' heads. Retrieval practice is the act of not getting information into students' heads, but focusing on getting information out of their heads instead. This is what they will need to go through when they're sitting in an assessment or the GCSEs or A-levels. And I think the more opportunities that we give students in terms of the opportunities to go through this process, the better they're going to do in assessments. It's not just about giving students a set of questions to complete. It must also be low stakes. They aren't expected to read out a score or have their work graded. They won't get in trouble if they score badly or forget how to do something. And I think it's okay not to remember the answer or how to do it. And telling students that it's okay is actually part of our job really there. The process of actively recording information is actually part of the process to remember it in the long term. And we need to emphasize that when we set up these opportunities in our classroom and keep reminding the students that it's okay to forget. John Hattie discusses in Visible Learning the need to sort of foster good relationships and build trust with our students in lessons. And students need to trust us that this isn't a test and that this really is okay not to remember something. And when I used retrieval practice, I used the word quiz. So, today we're doing a retrieval quiz, for example. It's much more informal. I wonder how many of us would give up, your Tuesday evenings to go to a pub test. Quiz sounds more appealing, doesn't it? So it's low stakes quizzing, allowing students the opportunity to actively recall prior learning, and feedback must also be given. And feedback is a real crucial part of the retrieval process, and it shouldn't be rushed. Merely giving students the answers without modelling it will decrease the chances of supporting students' long-term memory. Without good quality feedback, the students will only know if they got it right or wrong, not how they could get it right next time. Students also get to hear the professional, us, the teachers, going through the answers again, and then students can then copy out the answer. And I think the copying is also part of the process to help students embed that into their long-term memory. To sort of maximise the success of retrieval process as well, students should do this on their own as well, not using notes or not helping each other. What is it they can actually remember? There's more and more research out there now about retrieval practice and its benefits, but there's still a lot more as well that we're still learning about retrieval practice. Some of the research has suggested that it can support students' test scores, by approximately 10 or 12%. I wonder what your results would look like if you had an extra 12% of marks for each student. I actually did that as part of my NPQSL a few years ago. Needless to say, it was quite an eye-opener read to see the improvement that this had. These extra 12% of marks had on my department results and also the whole school performance results as well. It also supports students in terms of reducing their anxiety as well. They've been given the opportunity to sit in sort of a test condition under the quiz title and actually have a go at seeing what they can remember. And the more we do this again, it's not scary for them when they do an assessment or sit in that exam hall. As teachers and leaders and governors, we want our schools to do the best that they can do. And I think for students to succeed, in terms of exceeding targets and getting high positive progress A scores, that is our actual goal, isn't it? Our aim. But that will only happen when students make progress and actually achieve the grades that we want them to actually get. And for students to make progress, they actually have to learn something. I mean, it's quite a lot, actually, isn't it? Class teachers are in control of what students think about in lessons. And it's up to us, the class teachers, to ensure that students get the opportunity to recall that prior knowledge regularly. And for that to happen, we need to upskill our staff and on the importance of retrieval practice and how to implement it effectively. Simply giving students a set of questions or, with no real thought behind which questions or topics to give them will not really support their progress. We need to personalise the learning for the students in front of us and ensure the questions we set them are relevant for this group. Now, for those people, watching this video who are middle or senior leaders, I do want to stress that, I tried various methods on my own without a spotlight on me, without lesson drop-ins, seeing how successful retrieval practice is being. It was without pressures from, head of department, from the SLT, or the use of retrieval practice as a non-negotiable. I was able to actually experiment and try out using retrieval practice as and when I could really. I made multiple choice quizzes at first, but I soon found out that, this wasn't really sustainable. It just took far too long to create. I also used far too many questions to start off with as well, and I've sort of soon settled really on around about 4 questions per lesson as a starter. I also realised that if the same topic kept appearing in my 4th question in my starter, well, most of the students usually missed out on that chance to actively recall that knowledge. So I sort of mixed it up the order a little bit as well, so whereby question 4 in one lesson became question 1 in the next lesson. The point is, making the use of retrieval practice a success is going to take time. And those who are trying it, to adapt in their classrooms, and I think giving teachers the autonomy to adapt and make the necessary changes, make it successful in their classroom, that's really crucial. So upskilling staff and supporting student progress is key there. Right, so I'm going to sort of go through now about how I use retrieval practice in my lessons and in my medium-term planning as well. Now, I'm only using a couple of things there. Tom Sherrington actually has a number of other strategies on his website as well to look at if you want to look at different strategies. But so, put this into context then. I'm a maths teacher, and so I have found that in starters and quizzes, it is really key really for improving understanding and learning in maths. So one of the things I do is I regularly give students from year 7 all the way up to year 13 regular quizzes. We call them retrieval quizzes. This is one that I gave to my year 11 group, which was about an hour long. And so the quiz is made up of lots of exam questions, and students sit there without their notes, in silence, without their exercise books, and see what they actually can remember by doing past exam questions. Now, I think gone are the days now whereby teachers will give the kids something to do, like a quiz or a test, and you sit at your computer and go through your emails and so on. I use this time now in lessons to go around and look at the work the students are producing and get feedback on what it is they know and what they don't know. So I get a blank copy of the quiz. Having the answers is really useful as well. And I go around and I look at where students are going wrong, what the misconceptions are, what are the barriers to learning. Is there a word or a couple of key words in the question and the kids just don't know what it means, therefore they can't access the learning. And what I do is I go around and I make a tally. So students, if they're not sure how to do it, I put a little tally next to the question. Now I tell the kids regularly before I start it as well that I'm going to be doing this. I'm not marking their work. It's not a judgment on the individual. It's to find out as a group what questions we're going to go through next lesson. And so, the tally helps inform my planning for the next lesson. So this was an hour-long quiz. Next lesson then, we'll spend the start of the lesson going through the key 3 or 4 questions or topics that students struggled with in the quiz yesterday. So this is where I do just give them the answers to the questions so they can get that feedback if it's right or wrong, and then I identify 3 or 4 topics that the questions on the quiz that I then go through in detail and actually model how I answer that. After I've modeled how to do that, I then give the students questions like this, where we do some dirt feedback and they have a go at questions similar to the one in the quiz based on the feedback that we've just done. And then at the end of the lesson, then I'll either go through the questions or provide sort of model workings out for each of those questions as well. And I sort of do this with, particularly my Year 11 group, once every couple of weeks from sort of September to Christmas. And then, this will be a once a week task that they will do. And we have 4 lessons a week. So, a quarter of the lessons are taken up by actually doing the quiz, and the other quarter is taken up of actually going through and giving them feedback. So this here is an example of the starters that I regularly do. So start of every single lesson, this is what's displayed on the board. 4 questions based on prior learning, but again, it's not completely random. So once we've done the quiz and I've given them feedback, the learning hasn't stopped there. I'll sort of drip feed it into starters then over the course of a few weeks, missing out a lesson every so often. But the idea is that they haven't just learnt it, in that one lesson. I'm expecting it to take time. And so I think that's really crucial. Going through it in the one lesson, the kids haven't learnt it, they've just revisited it. I think it's really important that we keep drip feeding it into starters, and then maybe in the quiz that they do in, say, a fortnight's time, pop it in there again. Let's see then if they can actually do it in under test conditions on their own in silence with no notes. I suppose that's the real proof then, is whether or not they've understood it or not. So this is kind of a cycle, really. Retrieval practice starters, we do every single lesson. That takes about 20-25 minutes in total. So about 10 or 12 minutes roughly to actually have a go at the questions. And then, about 7, 8, 9 minutes then to give them the crucial feedback based on the questions they've just done. Depending on the group, every couple of weeks probably. So that's probably every 8 to 10 lessons. We would actually do a quiz with each of my groups. That can take half an hour or an hour. If it's half an hour, we'll go through the answers in the lesson and I'll give them the feedback there and then. Or if it's an extended quiz, it will take a whole lesson. The following lesson then, we will do a dirt feedback lesson where we go through those crucial questions they can do and have a go at questions similar. But then that informs my planning then for the retrieval practice starters. And again, it just keeps cycling and cycling.
There is a lot to learn in the world. Students can't learn everything, and educators can't teach everything, especially not over and over and over again each time students forget. What can we do to improve learning and reduce forgetting? How can we use our limited amount of classroom time and make learning stick? Based on more than 100 years of research by cognitive scientists, the most powerful and effective strategy for improving learning is retrieval practice. In fact, retrieval practice is more effective for increasing learning than common techniques including lectures, concept maps, and even note-taking. With retrieval practice, an evidence-based learning strategy, we bring information to mind. We retrieve our knowledge and we use our knowledge. For example, students retrieve what they know when they answer quiz questions. When students think about a course topic from last week, they're retrieving information and putting it to use. Even when we think about what we ate for breakfast, we're retrieving. With retrieval practice, when students think about and use what they know, they strengthen their learning. Keep in mind that high-stakes exams and assessments involve retrieval, but they're typically used to evaluate learning. On the other hand, low-stakes and no-stakes retrieval activities like quizzes, flashcards, and quick writing exercises can be used to improve learning. In other words, retrieval practice activities focus on improving learning, not assessing learning. How can we use retrieval practice to build student learning in our classrooms? First, use ungraded, no-stakes quizzes. For example, think about breaking up your midterm or one large assessment into weekly quizzes that are ungraded or carry very low stakes. Second, provide short writing exercises. Ask students to simply reflect on what they learned last week. These are just two strategies supported by cognitive science research. In fact, cognitive scientists are exploring a number of retrieval strategies to boost student learning. For example, does retrieval practice improve learning in K-12 classrooms? Does it work in medical education? Should I use short answer or multiple choice quizzes? How often should I give opportunities for retrieval, and should I give feedback? For more research, resources, and tips for applying cognitive science in your classroom, visit retrievalpractice.org and download our free guide for more information. It's time to switch from getting information into students' heads. Instead, let's focus on getting information out of students' heads with retrieval practice, and let's transform learning in our classrooms.
Right, so now I've got a few things for you to read, actually, a few slides. This is from the Overview of Research document from the EIF, based on retrieval practice. So I quite like this as a take-home message, really. I think for myself, every single lesson has an element of retrieval in it, whether it is the starter, whether it is a shorter quiz or a longer quiz. But every single lesson, students come to my lesson and they have the opportunity, I plan for the opportunity to revisit and actively recall prior learning. And I think that is really crucial in a classroom. And I think part of our job as teachers and sort of upskill teachers, let people know about retrieval practice, is saying, look, having the opportunity in every single lesson for kids to practice and try and recall things they've learned before is really, really essential to students' long-term learning and making that progress that we want them to make. This is actually quite a well-known sort of tweet from Dylan William back at the start of 2019 sort of time. When he says about cognitive load theory being the most important thing for teachers to know, I would slightly alter that. I genuinely do think retrieval practice is been the thing that's transformed my own teaching. I think a lot more now about what students are thinking in the classroom, and I plan those opportunities for students to practice things they've done previously, on a regular basis, every single lesson. Learning doesn't take place in that 1 hour, in that 1 week. When I teach something, my plan is how they're going to learn this over the next few weeks, the next couple of months, and about drip feeding that into regular lessons. I suppose for myself, that is the change of mindset that I have now when I'm planning lessons. I suppose that's sort of my takeaway message, really, from from this video clip. So I hope you found this video useful, and thank you very much for listening.